Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to talk a little bit more on the social repercussions of being visibly modified and why that means that sometimes we as piercers and tattoo artists and mod artists tell you no. So I saw a video on TikTok today. Well, I've seen a few recently, but the one that I saw today was someone who had recently gone to a doctor's appointment for some medication for a skin condition they had, psoriasis, the same skin condition I have. It's an autoimmune skin condition, so absolutely nothing to do with modifications. And the nurse was nice, the receptionist was nice, but the doctor spent probably the first 10 minutes of the interaction telling this person how she'd look so much prettier without piercings and how she should take out a bunch of her piercings, and they were messing with her face. And it reminded me of another video that I saw recently where someone was getting married and went to her dream bridal store to try on wedding dresses, and she knew what type of dress she wanted. She had picture examples on her phone, and they kept showing her dresses that were high collar and full back and nothing like the pictures she had. And finally she was like, hey, these are you're not bringing me dresses that are what I'm looking for. What's going on? And they were like, well, you've got all those tattoos on your chest and on your back. We want to keep those covered. And she was like, I want to show them off. I want a backless dress to show them off. And they were like, oh, we're not the right store for you to buy your wedding dress from, to get your wedding dress from. We don't think we're a good fit. And these are, all things considered, relatively tame examples, but good examples of the discrimination that people who are very visibly modified face. And it goes so much deeper than you expect until you are very visibly modified and suddenly start dealing with these things. And it is much more difficult than most people realize. There is a very popular saying in the body modification industry: you buy the ticket, you ride the ride. We're not facing discrimination because of something outside of our control, like the color of our skin or our abilities or our religious beliefs. We chose to modify our bodies. And sometimes these modifications are linked with spiritual beliefs, religious beliefs, or cultural beliefs. But for many folks, it's an aesthetic choice that they make with their body. And we are choosing to put these tattoos on our skin, to put these piercings in our body. And with that choice comes the social repercussions of that choice. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's okay. I think we should be able to do whatever we want to do with our bodies and live our lives happily and free from discrimination and judgment. But that is not the world that we live in. So when we talk about getting certain modifications, particularly more visible or modifications that are viewed as more extreme, we have to consider the social repercussions. It's not just, what's the healing process going to be like? Do I have good anatomy for this? Can I afford getting this done? It's also, how else is this going to impact my life? And some ways are innocent, just getting a lot of stares from strangers in public, or people coming up to you and asking you about your modifications. A lot of folks really like to touch me and see if my tattoos are real, which is a little bit uncomfortable. I don't love being touched by strangers in public, but in the grand scheme of things, it's annoying, but it's not harmful. Where it gets harmful is things like medical discrimination. I have a dear friend in this industry who is vegan and straight edge and volunteers with animals and gardens in his free time and has always been vegan and straight edge since he was a teen. And he got injured playing sports and literally snapped the bone in his leg. Visible bone, got rushed to the hospital, excruciating pain. This is a 10 out of 10 pain level. And they wouldn't give him pain medication. They gave him Tylenol. And he was in so much pain he could barely speak and communicate with the doctors to let them know what he wanted to do to move forward with treatment. And the reason why they were denying him pain is because they said that they thought he was drug seeking. This man who has been straight edge and vegan and hasn't even touched a sip of alcohol in his entire life, they thought he was drug seeking enough to not give him pain medication while his bone was sticking out of his leg, because he is covered in tattoos, because he's got full sleeves and hand tattoos and his throat tattooed. I've gone into dentist appointments for like real problems I was having with my teeth. I had a crown that I got put on as a child that was coming loose, and I had a dentist try and tell me I was probably having those issues because of my labret piercings that are nowhere near the tooth in the back of my mouth that had a crown, that physically could not touch the tooth in the back of my mouth that had a crown, that had nothing to do with the tooth that had a crown. I've had clients come tell me that they have had doctors say that they're having tooth and oral health problems because of their nose piercing. I've had clients come in and say that doctors refused to treat them for the issue that they were there for and instead blamed it on a tattoo or a piercing. And the amount of my friends, peers, and colleagues who have been denied certain medications, particularly pain management medications, because they were deemed drug seeking because they're tattooed and pierced and modified, is not small. And that's a very real stereotype that can affect you well into your life. I mean, I have friends in this industry who want to have children and want to get pregnant who are scared that they might not be able to access pain medication during labor and delivery because they're very tattooed and they don't want to be labeled as drug seeking and told that they have to deliver without an epidural or without certain pain management. And this is stuff that people in the industry and people who are very heavily modified have gone through. Medical discrimination and medical judgment of modified patients is a very real thing. It spills over into financial life. I've been the perfect applicant for some apartments I was looking at, earned way more than they asked you to for paying rent, had my down payment ready, had a stellar rental history, had great letters from all my previous landlords. On paper, I've had them tell me that I am like the best applicant they found for like their unit or what they're looking for, and I've shown up to tour the place and they've seen what I look like. And I've had people deny me without even giving me the tour, just telling me that I am not the right fit. And I've pressed and been told that's because of my modifications. I had a really good friend back when I was living in Philly who was apartment hunting and asked if I'd come along with him because he hadn't moved around much and I moved around a ton and had experience with this. And one of the realtors that was helping him with finding a new apartment saw me and said, well, you really shouldn't bring this person with you to tour these units. And he was like, why? Lynn's my friend and they know a lot about this stuff. And like, well, they've got those weird cheek piercings and landlords aren't gonna like that and people aren't gonna wanna rent to you and neighbors are gonna see them and be suspicious of you moving into their area. So I've been denied renting apartments and denied living in certain buildings or told that I wasn't welcome in certain neighborhoods because of my tattoos and my piercings. Some of my old coworkers had a really hard time getting a mortgage when they were ready to buy a house. They struggled to find lenders who wanted to work with them. Even though they kept immaculate tax records for a tattoo artist and had all of their paperwork above board and a really good amount to put down as a deposit, they didn't look like who the company wanted to work with. And many companies just turned them away right off the bat because they were so modified and said that they didn't think that they would be trustworthy or they thought it would be a hard sell for them to find them a home. Like the impacts of being very visibly modified are vast, especially as you work your way into adulthood and as you start to deal with things like needing medical care or wanting to buy a home or buy a car or rent a car or find somewhere to live. It's a lot and it definitely sucks. It's hard to know that you're being turned away from things that you want to do or places you want to live purely because of the decisions you've made with your body. And you know, I bought the ticket, so I ride the ride. As disappointing as it is for me when these things happen, and again, it shouldn't happen. It's wrong. It's very wrong. But I knew getting into this would be the case. I've known what I want to do for a throat and chest tattoo for probably about 5 years now. I haven't pulled the trigger on doing it yet because I wanted to be more established in my life and I wanted to have more money saved up. I didn't tattoo my hand until I had been piercing for probably about 6 or 7 years, and I was very beyond sure that I would be able to stay in this career and continue making a living in this career. Until then, my sleeves stopped at my wrist so that I could still wear long sleeves and cover them up. And even on the start of this sleeve, we haven't done my hand yet. I'm finishing everything else first because even just one less tattooed hand is less discrimination I face sometimes, or I can tuck this hand behind me wearing long sleeves and people will only see this hand that doesn't have tattoos. And it really is something that you have to think about. It's gotten a lot better in recent years, for sure. It's gotten a lot better, but it's still a very real thing, especially again, as we start to get into purchasing homes and accessing healthcare and things like that. You don't get as many weird looks in the grocery store or at the gas station, but that systematic discrimination, especially in certain areas and certain sectors of the world, still very much exists. So when a freshly 18-year-old comes into the studio and wants to get a little heart and sunflower tattoo on her hand, most of the artists I work with are going to tell her no. And when she goes online and complains that we're gatekeeping tattooing and not letting her do what she wants with her body, she doesn't tell the full picture of us trying to sit her down and say, hey, this is a really big decision you're making. This is a really big commitment. This is going to have really big social effects on your life, and you want to make sure you're sure before you do this. I saw those TikToks from folks who face discrimination at the doctors and buying a wedding dress, and I've also recently seen TikToks from 17, 18, and 19-year-olds who are pissed that they had a hard time finding someone to tattoo their face. It's so hard, because deep within me, there is a version of 16-year-old Lynn who just wanted a bunch of pretty extreme piercings, who was crestfallen and heartbroken that no one would give them these piercings they wanted. And now I am 30-year-old Lynn, and I would not give 16-year-old me those piercings that I wanted. At 16, I had no idea the impact of needing medical care and being denied quality care or medications that I need because of the piercings in my face. I had no idea what it would feel like to be turned away for a fourth rental property, trying to find an apartment to live in a new city because I didn't look right, because I didn't look trustworthy. I didn't know what it would be like to be turned away without even being shown a place as like a cursory politeness and then declined, just to be turned away at the door. I'd never had the experience of being told I'm not welcome in a restaurant because I'm too visibly modified, which is a real thing that I've experienced multiple times. I've even been told I can't go into a bar or a club because of my hand tattoo and some of my facial piercings. And there are some piercings and some modifications that I do or that my studio offers that I won't do without a long consultation with folks first. And part of that consultation is what it's like to get and heal these things. But a bigger part of that consultation is the social implications of having this done. And sitting someone down and being like, hey, so it's not gonna be easy to get a job with this. You might struggle to find places to rent. It's gonna be hard in the future when you wanna buy a house or buy a car, and God forbid you're in an accident and you need health care. You better hope you get a sympathetic nurse or doctor who also has tattoos and piercings, and not someone who'll deny you medication you need because they've made a judgment about you based off of this piercing that I did for you, or this tattoo that you have. And when we in the industry try to have these conversations, especially when we try and have these conversations on public platforms, we're often accused of gatekeeping or trying to control other people's bodies or tell people what they can and can't do with themselves. We're told that the fact that we won't do cheek piercings or face tattoos on a walk-in is why people go and get tattooed and pierced at home, and we're part of the problem because it's not harm reduction for us to refuse to do these things. Meanwhile, we are the ones who have already modified ourselves enough to know what it's like to live like this, to know what it's like to be refused entry places, to be refused medication, to struggle to find a doctor who takes us seriously, to struggle to access literal life-saving health care. And we simply just don't want to do that to someone else on a whim without being positive that they really understand what they're signing up for. And if I'm being honest, I don't think there's any way you can really understand until you do it. We can just try and prepare you as best as possible, but the first time you have a really uncomfortable encounter with someone because you're modified is, I don't know what anything could prepare you for that. It's scary. It's scary. The first time a larger than me grown man grabbed me on the boardwalk and rubbed my head to see if my head tattoo was real or fake, made a big stink about it, and then loudly announced that I wouldn't be welcome in any of his establishments on the boardwalk. I was 19 at the time and I froze. I didn't know what to say. It was so wild. I started growing my half shave. I have a big red rose tattooed on the side of my head here. And I grew my half shave out to cover that because no tattoo I've ever had has gotten more attention than that rose, or more strangers just coming up to me and touching me, and I couldn't do it anymore. Now I have my little mandala visible, and that comes onto my face, and that still gets less attention than the rose did, so it's wild sometimes. But I don't know that anything or any amount of discussion and conversation could have truly prepared me for how stressful and scary that interaction was. But man, am I grateful that I worked with such great tattoo artists already at that point in my life who had warned me about this and who had educated me about this. And I'd seen them go through similar instances and similar interactions. God, I saw the way the landlord of the building that my first studio was in treated the studio owner, a successful businessman. I saw the way this landlord treated him because it was a tattoo and piercing studio and because he was a tattoo artist, and the nasty comments he made about our probable drug usage in the studio and what we got up to after hours. Even though we were a primarily sober, safe, clean shop, it sucked. And if there is one thing you can take away from my channel and from my content, I hope it's an understanding of the social stigma and the social implications of this, and a level of appreciation for the seriousness of modifying your body like this. And in no way is this video designed to scare people out of getting the piercings or the tattoos that they want, or talk people out of getting the modifications they want. I think you should be able to modify your body however you want, whatever makes you feel happy in your own skin. That is the most important thing. But you have to have a thick skin to be very visibly modified. You have to be prepared to deal with some really difficult consequences from people just having rude things to say about how you look on the internet, all the way up to it literally impacting your healthcare. And that's not a small thing. And I don't think we talk about it enough in this industry. People who work in this industry talk about it. I talk about it with my tattoo artist friends and my piercer friends and very heavily modified folks who are very enmeshed in the industry as enthusiasts. But casually, this conversation has not had enough. And now we have a whole generation who got patchwork Pinterest sleeves and trendy angel fangs piercings, who are turning 20 and 23 and 25 and starting to have these encounters in the real world, starting to struggle with judgment and discrimination. And they are shocked that they are dealing with this and unprepared for the level of discrimination they're gonna face. And somewhere along the lines, we thought that just because you can have multiple facial piercings and work at Starbucks, and you can have blue hair and tattoos and work at the gas station, that everywhere was suddenly really cool with tattoos and piercings. And that is not the case. That is not the case in the slightest. And when you're choosing to get visibly modified, you are choosing a lot of the discrimination that comes along with it. Now, I do think that this is changing for the better, and statistically there are more people now than ever before with tattoos and piercings and modifications when we look at those numbers and those results. So we know that it's getting better. We know that it's getting more progressive. Some of the first airlines just allowed flight attendants to have visible tattoos and piercings. We've seen a huge surge in healthcare professionals being allowed to have tattoos and piercings, and all of those tattooed and pierced nurses and doctors are really paving the way for what I hope we see in the next 5 to 10 years as a big revolution in how healthcare professionals treat modified patients. And I really think we're seeing some amazing change happening there right now. But it's still happening, and it's not reached a lot of other sectors. It certainly has not reached the finance sector. There is still a lot of discrimination when you start talking about business loans and mortgages and car loans and things like that if you are visibly modified. And this is just, I think, a very important conversation that we need to have, and we need to have with ourselves, and we need to have with our friends, and we need to think about when we decide to get modified. Trust me, I would love to already have my throat and chest done. but it's probably not going to happen for me for at least another year. There's a certain level of stability I want to have before I cross that threshold of a neck tattoo. Because once I'm there, there's no going back, you know? That is way more visible in your face than my hand. And yeah, I already get a lot of discrimination for the tattoos and piercings I do have, but I know that it's only gonna get worse when I tattoo my neck. I know that it's only gonna get worse if I ever tattoo my face, which I would love to at some point, but I have not been ready in life yet to deal with that level of discrimination. I have opted to wait to have a certain level of stability. And yeah, there is a part of me that's bummed that I haven't spent my 20s and part of my 30s looking the way I want to look. But for me, I wanted a certain level of stability in life, and I traded some of those modifications for that, knowing I would get them later down the road. And there's also nothing wrong with choosing to do that too. All this to say, if you're thinking about getting very heavily modified or pierced, think about the process of getting it. Think about if you're prepared to get and heal this piercing or sit for this tattoo and all the other things that come along with it. But please also consider the social impact of getting this work done and the societal stigma and the way it's going to impact your life. And especially if you are young, especially if you are 21 and younger, and especially if you are under 18. Really think through some of these modifications before you get them. Start with stuff that can be hidden. Start with stuff that's reversible. You know, the giant rose on the side of my head was the second tattoo I ever got, but the whole thing is under my hairline. I wanted a part of it that came down behind my ear, and my coworker said absolutely not. You are 18. I'm not going to give you a tattoo on your head that you can't fully hide. Shave your half shave over further. And I am so grateful to him for doing that. Start with stuff that you can take out that's not going to leave bad scars, and work your way up to those bigger commitment modifications and more extreme modifications, and see what dealing with that discrimination and that attention in public and those factors feel like for you. And if you reach a point where you say it is not worth it to me to deal with all of these problems in public, to have these modifications, that's valid. That's valid, because it sucks. It sucks to get treated this way. But I really wanted to sit down and film this because it from the bottom of my heart breaks my heart to see these younger folks going through this discrimination and having these awful experiences during what should be happy times, like getting married. And I wish I could say that it's gonna get better or it's changed and you can just be who you are, but that's not the case. And so I think the best thing that I can do is be honest about what it's like for the younger generation and give you all of the information so that you can make really informed and educated decisions about how you modify your body. And that's all that I would like to see happen. Thanks so much for hanging out and letting me yap about a subject that I'm passionate about, but is a bit of a heavy subject. 16-year-old me is currently like crying, screaming, throwing up. She thought she was so ready to have a fucking, I wanted like a nasalang and shit when I was 16, and surface anchor projects that would have never healed, and ridiculous tattoos, and I thought that I should be allowed to get it right then, and I was wrong. I was so wrong. As someone who is 16 and desperate for this stuff, I was so wrong. So please, there's no rush to be modified. Take your time, respect your body, consider the implications, and be thoughtful with it. All right, folks, till next time, bye.